story begins, as we all know, the Jews are traveling through the wilderness for 40 years. We're now at the end of the 40-year period. So you can imagine, after 40 arduous journeys, which really break down to 42 specific journeys, which I've been writing about in my weekly essays. So they come now, the last of the 40 years, and they are worn down. They are really at the point of breaking. They've gone through the most difficult journey possible, as the Torah says. It was a difficult wilderness. It was a hostile environment, an environment that was filled with serpents, nachash, sarav, akrev, serpents, scorpions, and different dangerous elements. And now they're coming the 40th year. So the Torah says the Israelites moved on from the Har Mountain. That's where Aaron passes away. And they're going on their way to the South Sea, and going around, they're circumventing the territory of Edom, which was told to them specifically they should not go through the land of Edom. And the people began to become demoralized, the Torah says. Some people translate it as discouraged. Demoralized, discouraged. But the true word in Hebrew actually is a very powerful expression, and really can't really be captured completely in English. And the word that's used is Vatiksar nefesh ha'am b'derech. Tiktsar nefesh, koitzer nefesh. Literally, koitzer nefesh means that their souls, their spirits, were being shortened. Koitzer means shortened, but really it means they were being constrained. They were feeling unbelievable amount of pressure. There's an expression earlier in the Bible, when the Jews were in this bondage in Egypt, it says they're koitzer ruach. That ruach is used there, not nefesh, koitzer ruach. That their shortness of breath, or their shortness of spirit, meaning they again were crushed and oppressed. So tiktsar ruach, tiktsar nefesh rather, ha'am, is a very strong expression translated as demoralized, as discouraged, but it's much deeper than that, because it's referring that their nefesh, their soul, their spirit was completely crushed by the 40-year journey in the wilderness. So that's the mood that we're in, that after life's difficult journeys, and I'll soon spell it out in personal terms, after life's difficult journeys, now, Vatiktsar nefesh ha'am b'derech, that the spirit of the nation was close to breaking from this journey, b'derech, in their way, from the nation. And they began, as a result, they spoke out against God. They began to slander and they began to again complain against God and against Moses, his servant. As Rashi says, that they put the servant together with the master, and they complained against both of them, because Moses was God's man, in a sense his messenger, to take the Jews out of Egypt and take them through the wilderness. So they blamed him as they blamed God. And they complained, they said, why did you take us out of Egypt to die in the desert? There's no bread and no water. We are getting disgusted with this insubstantial food. They were talking about the bread of heaven, and they saw it as insubstantial. They saw it as not natural. They saw it as not absorbable, not digestible. It wasn't normal food. It was miraculous food, and it sustained them, but they were disgusted. How long can they continue going on like this? And what comes next as tit for tat, in a sense, as we'll discuss, cause and effect. When a person begins to become demoralized by the different difficult challenges of life, what happens is, it says that the divine forces in existence sent and caused poisonous snakes against the people. And when they began biting them, a number of them died. The people came to Moses and said, please, we understand now what we've done wrong. We have sinned against speaking against God and against you. Please pray to God and have him take away the snakes from us. And here's where the story gets even more bizarre. Okay, fine. First of all, why did God send snakes? As the Torah says, the expression is Hanachashim Hasrafim, the biting snakes, or Srafim really means the fiery snakes. Not just biting, but biting in the sense of burning them. So what happens next? Moses does pray, but Moses goes further than that, and he says the following. When Moses prays for the people, this is God's response to Moses. Listen to this. I'll read it in the Hebrew first, and then I'll translate it, because it's very, very interesting. Vayomer Hashem, God says to Moses, Aseh lecha saraf. God says to Moses, make yourself the image of a venomous snake, a poisonous snake, and place it on a banner. In other words, lift it up, place it on a high banner. In Hebrew, v'simaisei al nes. Nes is also the word for miracle, because it refers to something elevated, elevating us. So nes also refers to a banner that's higher than the regular. So place this venomous serpent on a banner. Everyone who is bitten shall look at it and live. Interesting. Strange. What happens? So the verse continues, Moses made a copper snake. Moses made a copper snake and placed it on a high pole. And whenever a snake bit a man, he would gaze at the copper snake and live. And with that, the story ends. Now, it's obvious there's something really strange here. First of all, what is the meaning of this entire story? Why does God send snakes in the first place? He wants to punish the people, let him punish, and there are many ways to do so, and he's done so in different manners. Why snakes? Biting snakes. Fiery snakes. Expression, Nachash Hasarav. Then, what is the solution? Okay, Moses prays. So Moses should pray to God, and that should solve the problem. No, but God says, no, I want you to now go and carve and engrave, and the word of Moses that God says is, make yourself the image, in Hebrew. Make yourself the image of a venomous serpent, of a poisonous snake, and let them gaze at it, look at it. What is the meaning of that? Since when does a snake heal? It's God that heals. And then what happens? If you read the Hebrew, Moses doesn't do exactly what God said. God said, make a poisonous saraf. The expression that God uses is saraf. Literally means a burning snake or a fiery snake. And Moses takes it and makes it a copper snake. Where does he get the idea of making something copper? God never used the word copper. And what is the point of looking at something and that should heal? What is the meaning of all of this? And this all remains cryptic when we read this story. Now, all the commentaries discuss this. They all address it in detail in many, many different ways. And the fact, however, remains that it still remains unclear and not really defined what this means. Above all, as we've discussed here many, many times, the real challenge is, what does this mean to us? What is the relevance in our lives, in our personal lives, and especially of a story of this nature? So let us begin with some of the commentaries that address some of these questions, and we'll start with the Mishnah. There's actually a Mishnah in the Talmud that touches upon this, uses these verses, and says more or less the following. Ask one of these questions. The question being, does a snake in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, the end of the 3rd chapter, to be precise, if you want to look it up, we talk about sources. It says, V'chi nachash machaya or nachash memis. Does a snake is the one that kills or one that gives life? It's God that does so. So why the snake in the middle here? And the Mishnah continues and answers. The point was, why putting it on a banner, on a pole, on a high place, in order that the people should lift their eyes to God. And as they lift their eyes to God, to pray to God, that heals them. So it was not the snake, God forbid. It wasn't the snake that kills or the snake that gives life. It's lifting your eyes to God that is the force that actually does that. To use the language of the Mishnah says, let me look into it, let's see. The time that the Jews look above and dedicate their hearts to their Father in heaven, that's when they get healed. When they don't, that's when they get hurt, they get bitten. That's the Mishnah. But the obvious question, which is asked by Rav Shneir Zalman of Liadi in the Likutei Torah, in his Hasidic interpretation of this week's chapter is, if that's the case, we're back to square one. Why make the snake and a pole? Just tell Moses to tell the people they should pray to God. The people turned to Moses and said, pray for us. Moses should have said to the people, you turn to God. What's the need for this pole? Do you need a snake on a pole to know to raise your eyes to God? Now, if you look in Rashi, the commentary Rashi on this entire story, what do you find? You find interesting things. Rashi says, why did Moses make a copper snake? Where did he get the idea of copper? Earlier it says that it's not about copper, it's about, as God says, soraf, a burning snake. Where did he get the concept of copper? So Rashi, quoting the Medrash, says, because the word nachash, and nachoshes comes from the same root. It sounds the same. Nachash in Hebrew is a serpent, a snake, and nachoshes is copper. Nachash and nachoshes. So since it's a lashon nofel, a type of synonym, so there Moses derived that he should use nachoshes, a copper. Again, the commentaries ask, what kind of answer is that? What kind of answer is that? Because of the words sound alike? What does copper have to do with a snake? And what does snake have to do with copper? Why didn't he just do exactly as God said? Take a venomous snake, whether it's out of copper, out of another item, however one determines it, and follow that. Why does he change? Instead of saraf, he turned it into nechoshes, copper. And the questions go on and on. But all these questions come and lead us to the bottom line, which is the story, the actual inner story of this chapter and of this episode in our personal lives. So, what is the spiritual meaning of the entire story? When we travel in the wilderness, it's referring to the wilderness of life, that we all live in a hostile world. This is a hostile world that we live in. It has all kinds of enemies lurking, predators, abuse, cruelty, injustice. There's also beauty in this world. In every wilderness there's also forms of beauty, and life, and hope. But it's also a very hostile environment. And unfortunately we see much pain. All of us, no one is immune from this journey through the wilderness of life. So in essence, the entire story of traveling through the wilderness is our own story. It's our story of traveling through the insensitive world, the corrupt world, and coming through not just intact, but thriving. Because the purpose of the journey through the wilderness was not just to punish, was not to afflict, not just to make life painful, but the purpose of it was ultimately in order for the Jewish people, to sublimate, to refine, to transform the wilderness of this world and turn it into a path to the promised land. Remember, the journey began out of Egypt. What is Egypt? Mitzrayim. Elamase B'nai Yisrael, when we say these are the journeys of the Jewish people as they left Egypt, but only one journey was out of Egypt. Why does it say all the journeys, all 42? Because all 42 journeys were conceptually the idea of leaving the constraints, Mitzrayim from the word constraints, limitations, leaving and transcending the narrowness of our lives and coming to the promised land. So all the entire journey through the wilderness is actually about transcending, transforming, refining the constraints, the challenges, the difficulties of life. That's the general purpose of the wilderness and its application to our lives. Okay. Each leg of the journey has its own particular challenge. The leg we're talking about right now is a very precise issue in life, and that is the biting of the snakes refers to when we're bitten in life, when we're bitten by venom, by poison. There are times we will be bitten. This may be overt abuse, it may be subtle abuse. We may be bitten as children, we may be bitten as adults. It's when life bites you, when something venomous, something toxic enters into your environment. And this can be applied in many different ways. As we read the Torah, we have to always apply it personally. Think of it, you're coming through a journey. And journey of life is difficult. And there's a point where v'tiktzar nefesh, ha'am b'derech, that your soul, your spirit, your nefesh feels v'tiktzar, feels almost out of breath, out of energy, demoralized, discouraged, resigned, whatever it is that oppresses us in that level, and especially if you've gone through many years of your journey, you say, enough is enough. How much more can I take of this? So this is a stage everyone comes in life. Some of us worse than others, obviously. Some people come to a point, a breakage point, the breaking point, as they say, a point where they don't feel they can make it one more day, one more moment. For others, it may just be moments where we feel very discouraged. But we will all have times, these low moments, and that's when, of course, we're most vulnerable. And we complain, and we get angry. We get angry at God, we get angry at God's messengers. We get angry at the things that are so-called promising us, the promised land, other gifts, and so on. And we say, why'd you take us to this place? Why am I here? We get angry at life itself. And as we all know, or I've discussed many times, the concept of reward and punishment in Torah is very misunderstood by many people. It does not mean that there's some God in heaven striking us with lightning when we misbehave. That's not the meaning at all. The meaning of reward and punishment in the Torah, as the Shalah explains, is cause and effect. Cause and effect. What's cause and effect? Cause and effect means that, in a way, when you put your hand in fire, would you say that the fire or nature is punishing us for putting your hand in fire? No. Cause and effect. We live in a world of rules, and as such, in a world of rules, there are consequences. Every action has a reaction. Every cause has an effect. And as a result, that effect impacts our lives, and sometimes things get worse as a result of our own behavior. This is called the art or the act of projection. You think, and as they say, as we talked about many times in What the Bleep, the concept of how your neurons are fired, that's how they get wired. In a sense, it's how you project, how you see yourself, how you react to both good times and bad times in life will have consequences. When you have positive blessings in your life, and you react with arrogance, when you react as if you're entitled, you react as if I'm a self-made person, as the Bible warns us. Don't say that you are self-made, that you achieve the success on your own. If you have that type of arrogance, it will come back. There are consequences when a person has arrogance and success. It may not be immediate, but at some point, it can have an impact on you. And when it does, it's a result of our own reaction. If, on the other hand, a person behaves with humility, humility is the action that is elicited by success, by prosperity, by blessings. Humility has an impact. It has an impact on you, has an impact on others. And look at it on a very basic level. A person who has arrogance turns off others, becomes a difficult person. So though this moment you may have power, but at some point it's going to come back to bite you. And the same is true when you're humble. When you're humbled by success, so that humility cultivates kindness in you, cultivates trust in others. They see that you are, you see that you look at your blessings as a gift, that it makes you a more refined person, a more giving person. That has immediate consequences. On a very basic level. I'm not even getting to the spiritual, cosmic, divine level. Now the truth is also the other way around, which means when we are suffering in our lives, when at times of tiktsar ruach or tiktsar nefesh, when our souls feel oppressed, when we feel hopeless, when we feel demoralized, that too can elicit two reactions. One reaction is you can become humble, you can become wise, you can look at it and see what is the meaning behind this. That doesn't mean that it's justified. It doesn't mean that anyone's justifying or trying to explain away why we should be hurt, why we should be demoralized. But you don't let your demoralization hurt you and others. The converse is that you do allow that to happen. You become bitter. You become angry. You become angry at God. You become angry at life. You become angry at God's messengers. You become angry at even the blessings of life that were given to you. Your vision is clouded, and you sometimes don't see that which is working. You only see that which isn't working. And sometimes it could even be justified. The Torah is not dismissing that this is possible. The Torah says that from this long journey of 40 years in the wilderness, there was a demoralization as a result of that. So the Torah is not saying that there is no justification, but there are consequences. And that's why the story is told to us. The consequences are that when the people begin to complain, they say, why did you take us here? Instead of saying, what does this challenge mean, which we'll soon discuss at length. But they begin to say, challenge God. There are consequences, cause and effect. You're becoming bitter. You're becoming angry. What is anger, if not fire? What is bitterness and demoralization, if not the bite of a fiery snake? So the snakes represent the attack on our own vulnerability. Remember, when you get demoralized and you allow it to impact your life, you are weak, you are vulnerable, and that's when sometimes the worst things happen. So as bad as things can be, they can get much worse if you allow it to affect you. Look at people who went, for example, through some of the greatest challenges in life. Why is it that some people were broken, demoralized, and couldn't handle it, and others, not that they have less pain, but they built. They did not let it destroy their souls. We will soon understand the secret, the difference between these two people based on this story with the snakes. But what I'm up to right now is saying that the story continues, that this consequence of you getting demoralized to the point that you begin to get angry, that you begin to complain, you begin to reject the blessings that were given to you. Besides the fact that you may not, that you reject an understanding why you're being challenged this way, then basically you bring upon yourself, which is a cause and effect. This isn't a punishment because God wants to get even. That would make no sense. Why would God want to get even with his own people? Why would he create people who he knows are weak and then just here to punish us? It's cause and effect. That their attitude turned into causing them to become bitten by the snakes. So now by poisonous snakes, by toxins. So toxins we allow into our lives. So yes, it's possible that through abuse or through other experiences, snakes bite us. But the question is, how much of it is on our hands and how much is not? And I just want to qualify this by saying, we're not discussing here a child who's been abused or hurt. That goes without saying. The child is innocent. That's a snake that's bitten the child, not due to the child's behavior, due to the parent's behavior, or due to the abusers, or the adult, whoever it is the one that's being abusive. I'm referring to, of course, what happens when we feel demoralized and we complain, and then we bring more toxins into our lives. So there's a certain amount of toxins that will attack us, but remember, we also have immunity and we have strengths to protect ourselves. When don't we? When our demoralization weakens our defenses. And that's this episode, in this story, in our personal lives. That attack of the snakes, biting the people, as a consequence of their own behavior. And that's why it was snake specifically, because the snake is a bite of the bite of the serpent. It is the bite of the serpent that goes back to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, that became man's enemy. The serpent, remember, represents the Yetzahara, the evil inclination, that voice inside of us that is there to challenge us, that is there to demoralize us. But as we'll soon say, this serpent is a very mysterious entity, because as we'll soon discuss, the serpent has a root and has a connection to something completely profound. But from our perspective, right now, where we speak now, the serpents are toxic, and their toxicity, as we say, toxicity, yes, it comes from the original serpent in the Garden of Eden, when the man and women lost their innocence, and they ate from the tree of knowledge, became conscious human beings, meaning conscious of themselves as separate from the God that created them, where form and function became dichotomized, where we were split between who you are and what you do. So now we are at the point where the serpents have bitten us. What happens next? So here the Torah continues and says, listen, what happens next is that hopefully in the scenario is such that you don't let it continue to bite you. At this point, now that the toxins have entered, and some people have died, God forbid, that there's a part of us that may have been killed psychologically, we are healthy enough to complain and come back and say, this is not good. And we come back to Moses and say, Moses, please beseech God to stop this epidemic. We've hit rock bottom now. We understand the consequences of our behavior. Please do something about this. So what happens next, as you'll see, is fascinating. It's beyond fascinating. You would think, okay, people make mistakes in life. People make mistakes in life. Now, the time has come to Do tshuva, as they say. We regret it. God should stop the biting of the snakes. And now we're back to the place where we are beginning life anew, so to speak, a new lease on life. But that's not what happens here. That's not what happens here. What happens here is God says to Moses, make a serpent and place it on a banner, on a pole. And Moses does exactly that. And those that gaze at it will be healed. Now, as I asked earlier, if the whole point is to look up to our eyes and to our Father in heaven, to look up to heaven and to connect, to cleave to the divine, what's the purpose of the snake? But therein lies the key message, that this snake in itself was sent for a purpose. In other words, this isn't just about getting away from line of fire, about freeing ourselves from the toxins of our lives, escaping or entering a world of peace. It's about redeeming the life itself. So this takes us back to why were we put into a hostile world in the first place? What's the purpose? We spoke about transforming it, refining it, but there's a deeper purpose in it as well. It's the ultimate purpose of creation that is fulfilled in the hostile world, in a world of serpents. And here's how it's explained. The Zohar says that someone who has not tasted from, someone who has not experienced the transformation of bitter to sweet, cannot enter the world to come. In other words, the purpose of existence is the transformation of bitterness into sweet. So it's not enough just to be able to free ourselves from the serpent's effects. We have to reveal and transform that serpent into something greater. What does that mean? So the Zohar, the mystics, the Kabbalists, and Hasidic interpretation explain in the Zohar, it says that there's a serpent that's rooted in the supernal heights, a cosmic serpent. And that serpent in this root is holy, is Kedusha. In other words, even the most challenging, the most toxic, the most difficult challenges in life are rooted in a holy place, in a very powerful spiritual place. But when they devolve and they enter into existence down below, they become toxic. They become poisonous. So it's rooted in what? In Saraf. Saraf is also the name of an angel. Srafim. Srafim is the highest level of angels from the world of Bria. We say Srafim emdim u'malai. We say it every day in the prayers. Srafim literally means the angels that are consumed by fire. What type of fire? The fire of passion. The fiery passion of connecting to the divine. So the word saraf, as it's used here, the nechashim hasrafim, the serpents that were fiery, is rooted in the fire of these angels. So you may wonder, what's the connection? Fire? Yes. What is the fire of the angels? The fire of the angels is their complete passion and their complete devotion, burning in with that passion in a holy way to connect to something spiritual. In personal life, it's those moments when you feel very passionate about something. But there's also a downside to passion. The downside to passion is you sometimes get so consumed with your passion, there's no patience for anything outside of you. No tolerance. Because that's the nature of passion, the nature of fire. It consumes you. You're so consumed with it. So the Hasidic masters explain that the root of intolerance, in the worst way possible, the root of abuse and of toxins, of the bite of the serpent, of the negative bite of the serpent, is rooted in the positive bite, so to speak. In the bite that comes from spiritual intolerance, from someone who's so consumed, so narrowly consumed by their own way of looking at things spiritually, that there's no tolerance for anyone else. So the nachash below, the serpent below, and its poisonous bite is rooted in the serpent above. So everything in existence has a root in the spiritual. This is a very powerful and a very profound concept in the Kabbalah that there's nothing in existence down below that comes from nowhere. Who put it here? How did it get into this shape and form? So it's, yes, it comes through a long process of, we call devolution, evolving forces, but they're all rooted in a place that is holy. What is the first root of all darkness in this universe? How is it possible that a human being, for instance, can hurt another human being? The mystics ask, if we are all part of one organism, we're all connected to Hashem Echad, to one God, we're all organs of one large body, all musical notes of one large musical composition, how is it possible that we can hurt each other? How can the right arm hurt the left arm? Their answer is, we don't feel it. We don't see it. We don't sense that we're part of one. Where is all this rooted from? It's rooted in what's called the Simpson Harishon, a theme I've talked about many times. The Lurianic secret, Seid HaTzimtzum. Why is it a secret? Because its power is a very secretive one. It's a very mysterious power. This power that God, divine concealment, that God hides His presence, is part of God's power. Just like there's the power of God to reveal Himself, God has the power to conceal Himself. Hein Gvuraisav, it's called. The Tzimtzum is an equal power of God as is light. Light is emanating. Tzimtzum is withholding. Think of it in terms of human terms. If a wise person is in the middle of a conversation with you, there are times they transmit and share with you brilliance, ideas, concepts. But when it's a wise person can also withhold. Sometimes they'll be silent. And there's much to be learned from their silence. Some would argue, or all should argue, that silence can be more powerful than speaking. What a wise person doesn't say has more message than what a wise person does say. Additionally, for a wise person to withhold takes more energy than to give. Because when you have an opinion about something, and you're wise, and your opinion is a wise opinion, well thought through, experienced, and so on, what way do you need more energy, to say it or not to say it? You need more power to restrain. So in a strange way, God's concealment, the divine energy that conceals, that allows us to feel that we're all separate, that we're all self-contained, that we're self-made, to the point that we can hurt each other, abuse each other, bite each other. The ability for a snake to be able to be in our lives, a psychological serpent, a psychological snake, with its psychological toxins, poison and venom, that can affect us, is rooted in the divine concealment. But the divine concealment itself is a divine energy. However, it's an energy that's powerful, even more powerful than the energy to emanate, to shine. But that power is imploding, basically reversed in withholding. So on its own, it's a divine power. But when it manifests in this world, it is a concealment, and that concealment can bring great problems. When the Jews traveled through the wilderness is a manifestation of the Tzimtzum. It's God's concealment. It's true that they experienced many miracles there. But the negative part of the wilderness constantly challenges this. People keep saying, where is God? Do we feel God amongst us? Why do they say that? God is sending them bread from heaven, surrounded by the clouds of glory, water, miraculous water. They just left the Mitzrayim, Egypt, miraculously, received the Torah at Sinai. Why do they say, Hayesh Elikim b'teichenu, Hayesh Havaya b'teichenu, is God among us? Because there was a part of them that also felt disconnected. The weariness of the difficult wilderness and its journey, Vaktiktsar Nefesh, caused their souls to be oppressed, caused them to feel demoralized. And that part of that we also have. We have many blessings in life too, in our times. Why is it that we ask, where is God? Because when it comes to difficult times, as much as great as things happen to us, at this moment we say to ourselves, where is God? We say to ourselves, I don't feel God amongst us. And with that, we come to the point where we understand that this life is a very lonely life, and as a result of a lonely life, it's very difficult for us to transcend the experience to the point where we can relate to the root of this whole wilderness and its challenges. We'll take a short 30-second break. We'll be back in one moment. Okay. Okay. So, now we continue on. So the serpent below, as I said, is rooted in the serpent above. So using the words of the Kabbalah and of Hasidic thought, the point is as follows. The expression is, as the Alter Rebbe uses it, the expression is that Hadinim tokim b'sharsha. The severities of life, this wilderness, the poison of the snake, are sweetened in their root. Which comes back to that Zohar, that only those that know how to transform darkness into light and bitterness into sweet can enter into the higher dimension of existence. Oh, why? Because the point here is not that we're passing through this world and damage control and come out intact. The point is we have to transform this world. Even the serpent here and all its challenges is about transforming it. And that's why it's not just about looking up on the banner and raising our eyes to God and to the divine and to the spiritual. It's about seeing within the serpent below the serpent above. Now let's discuss what that means. There's a concept that is difficult to really even relate to. It's a very powerful, very sensitive concept. And that is the idea of being Mekabel Yisurim Ba'ava, which means people who accept the difficulties of their life with love. Now, this is by no means a justification for Yisurim. Yisurim is pains, oppression. Yisurim can be terrible. People who went through the Holocaust and others are Yisurim. What's the concept of accepting it with love? So some would say that some type of blind superstition, people who have no understanding God is just being brutal to you, and you accept that with love without complaining. No, there's a very deep element to it. The Talmud tells of a man who was called Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum Ish Gamzu, his name was Nachum. He was called the man that said Gamzu, also this. So think of a man whose name Nachum, the man of also this. What is Gamzu? He would say Gamzu l'taiva. Though he suffered in his life, he suffered greatly, he would always say, whenever he suffered, this too is for the good. Now again, this could be dismissed as some type of childish thing, but we're talking about a brilliant scholar. And we're talking about many others that had the same attitude. This wasn't some type of act of folly or superstition or blindness, or he truly suffered. Because he realized that the serpent below has a power of the serpent above. And sometimes the way it comes down to this earth, it comes down in a very unrevealed way. Let me qualify again. This is not a justification for suffering in this lifetime. It is explaining, once a person does suffer, how he redeems suffering. And this is what the secret that God was telling Moses with the serpent. God said to him, take a saraf. God is speaking how it's in its root. That the serpent below is rooted in the saraf, in the burning passion of the saraf of the angel above. Moses, on the other hand, is speaking to the people below, so he understood that it's copper. As we'll soon discuss, as the Kabbalists explain, copper represents the paradoxes of life below. So take a serpent, God is saying. Take the same serpent that bit you, and I will show you the secret, how that serpent can heal you. But as the Talmud says, the Mishnah says, it's not the serpent that heals, it's not the serpent that kills. It is God that does so. But God works through messengers in this world. And the messenger of the serpent, which is a consequence of our own behavior, even if it's a consequence of negative behavior, you can redeem even something so negative. Because it's rooted in the serpent above. That is what basically is said by God to Moses. So here, therein lies the secret of healing. Homeopathy, for instance, is based on this principle. Let the disease cure the disease. Let the poison heal us from the poison. Antibiotics, in a different sense, even though homeopathy and antibiotics are not necessarily seen in the same sentence, but is also taking the negative and turning it into a force of immunity. You take concentrated bacteria or some other toxic force, and you do it in a way that builds up the immunity. What builds up immunity inside of a human body? It's the forces that are negative. However, if they're too overpowering, they can, God forbid, hurt and kill. But if you know how to build up immunity through them, they build up the immunity to the poison itself. The words of the Talmud goes, "B'neyu be'aba lishde be'narga," that the wood of a tree can only be cut down by the wood of a tree. It's basically the axe that has a wooden handle that is needed to cut down a tree. The Talmud is referring, in Sanhedrin, to a prophet whose name was Avadia, who was a convert. And the Talmud asks, why were the greatest messianic prophecies delivered by this prophet? Greater than the prophet Isaiah, Ezekiel, Yecheskel, Yirmiyahu. Why Avadia? Because the prophecy of transforming the world has to come from someone who came from the world. So when you are a person who has experienced something, even if it's a very negative experience, you have a certain credibility, a certain power that can help diffuse and can help transform that experience, where someone who never tasted from that forbidden fruit can never really do that transformation. This is an unbelievably profound concept. So Moses is being told by God, no, it's not just enough that you pray and heal these people. I want you now to learn the secret. They complained, they were bitten by snakes, redeem it, not just escape it. Discover that within the serpent lies healing. And of course it's the divine power. That's why it wasn't enough, as the Alter Rebbe says, just to lift your eyes to heaven and connect to God. God wanted us to see it in the universe. Look at the challenges of your life and also see the divine in there. Lift your eyes, but lift them through the serpent. Look not only at the positive things in life, but even the negative ones. See the negativity of life. The fact that people can hurt each other evolves from what? From Gvurosav, Hein Gvurosav, the divine concealment. Not a justification. It's an explanation of understanding where it's rooted from. So how do we heal from the oppression of life? It's not just we escape from it. We learn to reach into its heart, the heart of the serpent, and turn it into a healing agent. That takes a lot of work, and it takes ultimately Nachamish Gamzu to accept sometimes that suffering. Now, of course, we do not tolerate suffering. We challenge God. A man of faith, a woman of faith will always challenge God, as Moses did. Why are you doing evil to these people? Or Abraham did when he said, is the judge of the universe not going to do justice when God was about to destroy the city of Sodom? So this isn't about justification. But it's once it happens, and once you've done everything you can humanly possible to alleviate the suffering or the pain or the challenge, there's still a certain power within it that needs to be redeemed. And it's redeemed when we take that negative experience and we accept it with love. Not because of the negative is love. That would be masochism. That would be self-destructive. Because we see there's a divine force even there, and we could look to find how this is also for the good. That it can lead you to a good place if you allow it to do so. And this is what Moses was saying with Nechash and Nechoshes. He made it out of copper. Copper, the Kabbalists explain, and Hasidic elaborates, is that world where copper refers to the level of Tiferet. Tiferet is balance. But as it evolves below, it can be a Nachash, it can be a biting serpent, a toxic serpent. And Nechash and Nechoshes, by transforming it to recognizing the root of Nachash, is not just in Hebrew two words that sound alike. The Hebrew language is connected. So the same letters that make up serpent also make up copper. Copper as it was used in the temple. Copper as being a force that is like an intermediary between the negative toxins, leading it to the highest levels of holiness. We know there's gold, silver, and copper. Gold, silver are considered to be Ava and Yira, Chesed and Gvura. they are considered to be higher spiritual dimensions. And of course are more precious and more valuable than copper. Copper is, in a sense, more a lower dimension. But at the same time, it's like the bridge between the Nachash, the serpent, the biting serpent, to a more spiritual source of that serpent. And that's really the meaning, the deeper meaning of this entire story. And that's also why, when we say, for instance, you find in Egypt, you find a similar concept. You find that the people, when Moses and Aaron come to the Egyptian people, to the Pharaoh, and they confront them, what is the first sign? They take the rod, and Aaron's rod, and turns it into a serpent. And then the serpent turns it back into a rod. You see how the serpent of the rod is a mata. Mata Moshe, mata Aaron. This is a rod, a holy rod. How serpent can be turned into a rod. Now in our situation, it's a similar idea. It's how do you take a serpent and turn it into a nest, into a banner that helps a person connect to the divine. So obviously it's not quite the same, because there it turned into an actual rod. Here it still remains a serpent, but the serpent is connecting to its root, where you ultimately sweeten it at its root. Now, to explain this a little more, Hasidic masters say the following. There's a Zohar that explains the idea of the Yetzahara. As I said earlier, the Yetzahara is compared to the serpent that came to Adam and Eve in the garden and seduced them and compelled them with a great argument to defy God and to eat from the tree of knowledge. So the Zohar says, what is this Yetzahara? Who created this evil inclination? Who created that voice inside of us that tells us to defy what God wants? It's not man-made. We're all born with the Nefesh Habamis, the animal soul, the selfish voice, the narcissistic voice, the one that can hurt others, the one that may be driven by self-interest, the id in Freudian terms. Who created it? And the Zohar says it's God that created it. The Yetzahara is just another angel, just another messenger. And that's why it says, Satan upnina, l'shem shemayim niskavnu. The Satan, which is Satan, like the Yetzahara within all of us, it's serving God's purpose. God says, I am sending you as a servant to challenge my children. I want you to tempt them. I want you to put all kinds of arguments in their mind to do something that I don't want them to do, to defy me. Now the Yetzahara, this angel, doesn't want to go. Why would I want to go and convince your children, your people, to do something that you said they shouldn't do? But God says, this is my mission that I send you on. So begrudgingly and unwillingly, these messengers enter this earth. Each one enters into our own souls and our own spirits and take on the form of a serpent, a toxic serpent, that does everything possible to seduce us. And when it seduces us, it brings upon more serpents. As I said earlier, the vulnerability where we're bitten by the poisonous snakes. The ones that are natural to us are Yetzahara, and the ones that we allow to come into our lives when we get demoralized, when we make things even worse than they were in the first place. But these serpents were sent by God, as the story in this chapter discusses. And as they were sent by God, they have their mission is not for us to succumb to them, but for us to recognize and be wiser and not to give in. So that would be, of course, the initial and best scenario of all, where we don't allow these voices to impact us. But once they did, what do we do then? So that's the wisdom that comes once they bite you enough. You come to realize maybe there has to be a different approach. And the different approach is not just to pray, get rid of these serpents. It's to understand that why the serpents were sent in the first place. They were sent to test you. They were sent and they are messengers of God. So their root is in Saraf, is in a very divine place. As they come below, they take on the shape of a serpent that bites, a force that is challenging. And it's us, human beings, that have the power to get behind the curtain, to take off the mask of the serpent, basically unmask the serpent and undress it and reveal the divine force within it. that all it was a challenge to us. All it was a deeper dimension of love, a deeper dimension of spirituality. As I said, that Simpson is rooted in the Gvura, in the Heinein Gvurosav, in God's ability to withdraw, to conceal. So there's more power in this concealment than there is in revelation. And we have the power to reveal that power in the serpent. And that's why God says to Moses, place a serpent on the banner. And Moses places it on a pole and says, those that will look at it, that will gaze at it. The expression first is used look. God uses the word look. Moses used the word gaze, where you need more kavanah. You need to concentrate. You see, from God's perspective, God sees it. From the inside out, God sees the serpent as his messenger. But we don't. When we look at the serpent, we see it as an enemy. We see it as a force that has brought us down, that has seduced us, that has caused us to defy our calling, to betray ourselves. So we need to gaze at it. But not gaze at the serpent per se. Gaze at the serpent of copper and see the divine hand in it. As we raise our eyes to that serpent, we're raising our eyes to God. It's God's hand at work. That's the power of the story. That we're not just talking about getting outside of the difficult suffering of our lives, but it's redeeming that suffering. And that's why the story is told to us. It's the ability and the power that we have to gaze at that serpent and through it see it as an agent of the divine in our lives. Again, this is not meant to be an explanation or justification. Interestingly, the Tzemach Tzedek, when he explains this, he says, the first thing is, through a positive and optimistic attitude to life, we can preempt and not need to go through this challenge. If we are able to see the initial toxins of our lives, the ones that are natural to us, not the ones that we brought upon ourselves, and we're able to look at life and look for the divine hand behind our experiences, then we don't need to go through such difficult experiences. That itself is the best preemptor of pain and suffering. That doesn't mean we're immune of pain and suffering. But once we go through it, and we go through deeper the throes of the 40 years of the wilderness, which was brought upon the people by themselves, through the story of the scouts, as told earlier. Had they not slandered the land, had they not challenged God, they would have been in Israel already. But once we bring upon ourselves new dimensions of suffering and oppression, now we can become wiser, and now we can discover deeper secrets of uncovering the supernal and higher serpent within the lower serpent. So, in practical terms, what this means is that in our lives, we will all have those serpents that bite us. We all have toxins. And the key is to understand that you can, by looking at it in the right way, you can uncover and discover its deeper power. And it becomes a force, an agent of healing as opposed to an agent of killing. But the key is, of course, connecting to the source. Lifting our eyes to higher and recognizing that their divine hand is a divine force, their divine control of all the events that happen in our lives. And that's ultimately the secret of the people that were able to make it through the most difficult situations. I've spoken many times to Holocaust survivors, to others who have suffered greatly, and those are the people you learn most from. On one hand, there's a certain sanctity to these people. The sacred space that they're in, very few can compare to. It's like going into the Holy of Holies, and you have to be extremely careful never to always recognize and be in awe of that experience. But at the same time, you learn things from these people. Above all, what do you learn? They, in a way, have looked the serpent in the face and have come out stronger. How is that possible? Where did the strength come from? The strength came from the serpent itself. Not the serpent, the toxic serpent. That should be destroyed. Poison should be destroyed. But the experience that came out of it, the fact that they were able to endure it, to get through it, the fiery serpent, made them stronger. That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And more importantly, the thing that was about to kill you gives you the power to heal from it. But it's the recognizing the divine force within it. It's not just the power of the so-called challenge. It's recognizing. You'll hear consistently from people who've gone through difficult times. They will say, many of them will say, it is the divine gift that I am here. I don't know how I made it. Why would they say that? God betrayed them, took away their families, destroyed them. They see gift. they nevertheless see a gift. Not in the destruction, they never forget that, but in the rest of their lives. A certain healthy approach. They don't allow the toxins to spread into the rest of their lives. Now, is anyone perfect? By no means. Children of Holocaust survivors will tell you this isn't so simple. The toxins never go away. They pass on to the next generation. So I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm not here to discuss it on every, to be able to justify. People who've gone through such a hell, no one can really describe. No one can in any way judge. So obviously much pain has remained, but yet you do see strength. They've built families. You feel that it could be redeemed, not today, maybe in children, maybe in grandchildren. Maybe the children of Holocaust survivors, yes, are part of the Holocaust survivors themselves. They're still part of the fire. So their job perhaps is to take it to the next generation. Don't let it demoralize the next generation. In other words, we have to stop it in its tracks and then look back and look within those challenges. And we say to ourselves that perhaps we can elevate ourselves. Perhaps we can look deeper and see the divine hand in all these experiences. So this, in a summation, is the story of this week's chapter. This has been elucidated, as I said, through the works of the Kabbalah and Hasidic thought. And I wanted to just touch upon one final point that I recall seeing in one of the books. So let me just look it up. That, in a way, the process that we go through in our own personal lives is like a certain type of journey, which means we begin by looking and experiencing negative things in our lives with discipline and wisdom and concentration. And this is so-called a practical exercise of this discussion. We're able to look inside these negative experiences. Sometimes it takes distance, it takes time. It needs an objective party to help you look at it. So practically speaking, I'm suggesting is, any of you, any of us has gone through a difficult time, has been bitten by a serpent, it's important to look at it when you have the strength to do so, of course, and you're out of the line of fire, and get objective friends that you can speak to about it. It's important to look at it, and sometimes with distance and with objective look you can see not necessarily why it happened, but you can begin to look at what strengths did you develop as a result of it. That's a strength that came straight from the toxin. It came from the root of the toxin. So we have to say, and that's what he focuses on, that it's not about the toxin itself is a healthy thing. It's rooted somewhere, and that's what you're looking for. As I said, you sweeten the dinim in their roots. You need the root to sweeten the din below. Din is the severity. So you have a severe experience, you need to slowly dissect it and open it up and slowly reveal a deeper energy that comes out of it. So it's the energy that we're looking for. When the servant of God, the messenger of God, is seducing someone or tempting them or trying to get them to do something wrong, the actual act of doing something wrong obviously is not what's being redeemed. But the energy that that messenger of God is investing is an energy that we can redeem. Is the energy that when we resist it, when you resist something, you elicit a lot of power. So essentially, we're talking about a type of, as I said, it's a process, a journey, where we go from a negative, we first look at it. As we look at it, we can begin to reveal different types of strength that originated from it, or are derived from it, until we get to its root and source. That's the point when we look at the serpent on the banner, on the pole. It's the idea of looking at the serpent in your life, lifting it up above your experience, lifting it up to a place where you see it as a place where your eyes turn to heaven. You see it as a divine agent. So you've taken a serpent that was down below on earth, on the ground. Moses, at God's instruction, places it on a banner, on a pole that's higher than us, forcing us to see that this same serpent, we're not ignoring, we're not just killing it, we're placing it on a place, and when you look at it, it begins to give you healing. It begins to give you strength. This is, I believe, a process that takes several steps, have to be spelled out, but The end result is healing. The end result is strength. The end result is life. Those that gaze at it, gazing, with concentration, with effort, will ultimately learn to be healed by it, and are healed by it. That is, in essence, the story. So I look at the story as you begin reading it, and it seems to be very weird and strange, bizarre. What's going on here? Why is it Sorov? Why Moses changes the words? The whole story. Why serpents? Why putting it on a banner, on a pole? But when you realize the spiritual and psychological significance of it, it has an unbelievable message to all of us. A message of hope, a message of the ability to transform even the most negative experiences in life. And I want to say, on a personal note, that we live in a world where there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. Personally, thank God, I've been blessed that I've had my share. Everyone has their little share. No one's immune. But when I look at some others, I feel quite blessed. I see some people growing up in unbelievably terrible homes, where not due to any fault of their own, we're just simply hurt again and again and again. I see others who experienced later in life terrible losses. Innocent children, adults, senseless pain. And there's too much of it in this world. Too many tears, too much anguish, too much pain. Much more than joy, if you really add it up. But at the end of the day, the only thing that makes sense in life is to understand that there's a force behind it all. Because if you ignore that, if you say that all this pain you conclude with means there's no sense, there's no design, I would say that's a much more painful life, much more lonely life. And it's a choice we all have to make. Some people have come to that conclusion, whether it's based on their own bitterness or it's based on their own so-called intellectual skepticism. I'm not here to judge anyone. I just speak from what I've learned. I speak from what resonates with myself, what I see in history, what has worked. Who are the people that have survived? Who are the people that can claim and can speak about eternity? Who have ancestors and can talk about even those that were once in pain, but today their children rise. What kind of joy is that? It's an unbelievable amount of redemption. That redemption lies in understanding that all forces of life, even the most painful ones, come from somewhere. The expression is Ein Ra Yered Mo'maila. Evil does not descend from above. So in other words, above there is no evil. The evil happens down here when we don't recognize that the concealment has power in it, positive power. So we feed into the concealment and we then hurt each other. If we were able to see how this universe is all integrally connected, how we're all parts of one large organism, all musical notes in one large composition, we would not have pain. We would not have the injustice we do to each other. Would there still be pain in the world from God? Well, in the beginning there would be, because that's part of the concealment. But we believe that if we don't allow it to consume us, we don't allow it to destroy us, we can bring a world where there will no longer be such pain. When we will see the serpent, as the Talmud says, when Mashiach comes, the serpent will be a Shamish Gadol, will be a great servant, the servant of God. It'll be a servant that will help us, support us. If you were able to know that this challenge in life, this temptation, all it really is a divine energy coming to you and trying to make you a stronger person, and not succumbing to it as a result, then the whole world would be a different place. So I would suggest that all of us, next time you have a temptation, next time you have an instinct to hurt someone else, think about it. It's about thinking, about being conscious of it, being sensitive. And if we all made that little decision to shift something inside of us, to shift that self-absorbed type of life, to see that the forces in life, including the serpents in life, are serpents on a banner, agents of God, that when we look at them, we see with our eyes rise up to our Father in heaven, and we see the divine, and we cleave to it, that itself will help redeem the world. And cumulatively, as we each do that in our own particular way, we all have the ability and the power to actually transform ourselves and bring a world that will be, as I said, one that is completely transformed. The wilderness becomes a divine home, a garden for the divine, and we can all live in that type of peace. Good evening, everyone. It was a pleasure and honor to speak to you, and as usual, please have the strength to forge through this wilderness of life, and let's all do our small part. So until next week, I bid you a good evening, and I will see you next Wednesday night. Good night, everybody.